What up, boys? It's Undead here, aka Two Dads. I know it's been a while since we've done some YouTube content, but here we are. First of all, for anybody that has been paying attention to my Twitch channel, we are transitioning into playing tank for next season, season 4. So I want to start doing some YouTube guides for the tanks that I'm playing right now, or at least YouTube discussion videos, whether it be about stats, talents, essences, gameplay, whatever. Strengthen the meta. With that said, I just want to say I appreciate everybody who's shown so much love to all my rogue videos. I will still be keeping up with the rogue, even though we're playing tank now. So when the next patch drops, it may not be as in-depth, it may not be as detailed because I'm going to be spending less time playing rogue, but I will still be making videos to help you get through whatever changes come for 8.3 and whatever comes with that. But for today, we're going to talk about specifically talents and essences. I wanted to do separate videos, but I think they play together. Your talent choices and your essence choices impact each other so much as Vengeance Demon Hunter that I wanted to cover them both in one video. So TLDR is your talent choices depend. So we're going to talk about why they depend, when they depend, and like how you make that decision. There's no like simple answer to should I play this build or this build in keys. And we're specifically talking about keys here, not raid. As far as the first 4 rows go, I would not swap off of any of these talents. You take Abyssal Strike, Fallout, Flame Crash, Fracture, pretty much every situation. I'm doing some exploring with the help of Evade, who's doing more of the exploring. Potentially playing Feed the Demon in like extremely high fortified keys, where Vengeance is very vulnerable, but inconclusive thus far, and I still just recommend Fracture, and the playstyle is really fucking weird. So I just go with this. As far as the 106 row, Sigil of Change in like 95% of situations is what I recommend, but you may be playing through a dungeon and thinking to yourself, man, I'm not using chains at all. And if that is the case, I would swap to Quicken Sigils. I would either focus on finding better uses for chains or swap to Quicken Sigils. This is going to be a little bit higher DPS just because of more flame sigils, but also gives you a very low cooldown on your Science Sigil, which in some situations is very good. It's a base 48 seconds, and then when you factor in Cycle of Binding, every time a sigil hits, which also procs off the sigil that's granted by Flame Crash. So every Infernal Leap and every Flame Sigil are going to reduce the cooldown by an additional 2 seconds. So you end up with like basically right around a 30-second cooldown on Science Sigil, which is kind of nutty in places that you can make it work. But I still recommend chains. And then finally, the 108 tier is the tier you see the most discrepancies, I think, and I think it goes hand in hand with your choices at the 110 tier. So first, we're gonna ignore Fel Dev because I don't think you should be taking Fel Dev anywhere. And we're talking about Gluttony versus Spirit Bomb, and what their strengths are, how the playstyle differs, and where I think you should run them. So talking about Gluttony first. Gluttony is just base Demon Hunter playstyle. Assuming you have Fracture, you generate souls and pain with Fracture, and also Immo Aura with Fallout. You spend them simply on Soul Cleave. So you end up in this place where your globals are almost every other global is a Soul Cleave. Soul Cleave absorbs 2 souls. Each one of those souls heals you, in addition to Soul Cleave healing you. Now this isn't dependent on Gluttony that you play this way. This is just how Demon Hunter plays at its base with no talents. Gluttony just adds an added benefit, more defensiveness to consuming souls. So you have, every time you consume a soul fragment, you have a chance to activate meta for 5 seconds. This was on in Legion, this was on the artifact weapon, it's now in the form of a talent. And it's just a benefit you get while just playing Vengeance Demon Hunter the way you would play it with no talents. You're in meta more often, which inherently is a defensive choice and makes you more likely to be alive. Now, the benefits of this are, 1, you don't have to change your play style at all. You don't have to change the way the class plays. How it plays out of the box, this talent works. 2, obviously higher meta time. One of the biggest struggles, if not the biggest struggle of Vengeance Demon Hunter, is We have one of, if not the lowest, uptimes on our active mitigation in Demon Spikes and also in meta. Meta, you could consider to be active mitigation on its own due to the insane defensive benefits we get from being in it, from both armor and health. But Demon Spikes is our other active mitigation. So most tank classes work in a way where you want to have your active mitigation up all the time, right? Like Warrior works that way with shield block. They take the talent bolster to let last stand allow them to fill those gaps in shield block, and then shield blocks back up and they have effectively 100% uptime. Brewmaster works that way with Iron Skin Brew. Guardian Druid functions that way with Iron Fur. Death Knight functions that way with Bone Shield, in which all these classes can effectively have 100% uptime, whereas Prot Paladin and Demon Hunter are the exceptions where you don't have 100%. So this talent fills that gap a bit. You still will not have 100%. You really won't have near 100% uptime on active mitigation, but it improves it. This playstyle, the base playstyle, also has a benefit of being very consistent in how you heal, with effectively every other global, sometimes every third global being a soul cleave. You're consuming 2 souls every other global or every third global. And much of your survivability is based around self-healing as opposed to just not taking damage. You will take a good bit of damage as Demon Hunter, and self-healing is very important. Think of it how Blood DK plays. You take a lot of damage, but you heal a lot of damage. So if you have these longer gaps, which we'll get to when we talk about Spirit Bomb, in when you're healing yourself, those are longer periods of time in which you can just get globaled, which is not uncommon for Vengeance Demon Hunter. Like I said, with gaps in your active mitigation, if you then add on a gap in your self-healing, you put yourself at risk in a lot of situations. Some of the downsides to it are obviously it's a lower damage build. It doesn't have Spirit Bomb funneling its damage. The burst healing is a bit lower, with Spirit Bomb obviously being able to consume 5 souls, whereas Gluttony consumes 2 on a soul cleave. So Spirit Bomb can burst heal harder, just less frequent. Other downsides that I would say to the Gluttony build, obviously threat, because it's a lower damage build, you're going to be lower on threat. I guess it feels like it doesn't feel clunkier, but it feels like it's more boring, I guess, is how I would put it. From most people's perspective, I think they would consider Gluttony to be more boring. But that's besides the point. If you're trying to play keys at the highest level you can, you kind of play what is good, right? So then with Spirit Bomb, we'll talk about how the playstyle changes a little bit with Spirit Bomb. With Spirit Bomb, your goal is to consume all of your souls with Spirit Bomb, consuming them at levels of either 4 or 5. Obviously, you generate these with Fracture, Immo Aura as well, and the Essence Sever trait. And then when you consume, you dump your excess pain with Soul Cleave without using any souls for Soul Cleave. You're just using it for damage and the little base healing that's on Soul Cleave. So as you can see, we fill with Throw Glaives and stuff. We get to 4 or 5 souls. We consume. Big burst of damage, big burst of healing. You probably notice that it is much more damage than the Gluttony build. But these bigger gaps, it's almost never every other global that you're healing. At the least, it's every third. Which I mentioned before, makes you more vulnerable for longer periods of time while you're playing that way. But obviously benefits are threat, damage, burst healing. Negatives are lower uptime on your AM because you're not getting random procs into meta. You have more periods of time where you're vulnerable. You also, if you're just playing Spirit Bomb for damage, you are having bigger gaps in when your self-healing comes in. However, you can play as if you don't have Spirit Bomb. Like when you have Spirit Bomb, you can play as if you don't have it, for extra protection if you're in like a sketchy spot in a pack. And you should do, like if you're going to die within 2 globals, you should just be soul cleaving or bombing with lower souls. to get those souls into you and just make sure that you don't die. So with that said, a lot of the choice here in these two talents comes down to when you start to feel like you're in danger, right? So if you're doing keys, and for my sake, I think I play Spirit Bomb up to like 18, 19-ish. I really like Spirit Bomb, and the extra damage, great for speeding up keys. Most packs you can play in a way where you don't need the healing as often from Gluttony. You don't need the meta uptime from Gluttony. And you just benefit so much more from the damage of Spirit Bomb, and it's more fun to play. I think Spirit Bomb is the more enjoyable talent. Whether it be the better one in every situation is like up for you to decide. But for you, it might be lower. You might be a lower geared player. You might be new to the class. You might be struggling to survive in, say, a 13 or a 14 key. And if you are struggling to survive, then I would recommend playing Gluttony. And then you kind of like, you slowly find your place. Like how high can you go before you have to start playing Gluttony? How high do you go before you start just randomly getting one shot by something? Because that will start to happen. Like as I get into 21, 22 keys, there are spots where I just get globaled, and sometimes it's because I didn't play correctly. A lot of times it's because like I made a mistake somewhere with spikes charges, or I get a meta proc and I don't notice it, and I use a spikes charge anyway, so I don't use that little gap, that little reprieve you get from a meta proc to let spikes recharge more. Or like interrupts can be missed, or I can pull too much, or not calling for externals properly to fill gaps in between spikes. But some dungeons, you're almost reliant on Gluttony, and then if you don't roll Gluttony in the right spots, like almost nothing you can do, and you get globaled in some situations when you can't kite. So you kind of have to play, and when you start feeling that way, when you start feeling like, I don't know what I could have done differently here, I don't know how I could have lived, I don't know what I could have improved on, that's when it's probably time to start playing Gluttony. And Gluttony is more forgiving, it's more defensive, obviously, and with that. So with that said, let's talk about essence choices based on your talent choices. Now, Gluttony, the proc chance on Gluttony is obviously, it's the same proc as Vision Major. You get meta for 5 seconds. The proc chance on Gluttony is between 2 and 3 procs per minute, and the proc chance on Vision of Perfection is less than 1. So if you're thinking like, oh, I'll just play Spirit Bomb, but with Vision of Perfection, it'll be basically the same, it'll be fine. It's not really the case. Vision Major by itself is not insanely powerful. I think the minor is maybe stronger than the major. The major, obviously, I think is very good. But I think it goes hand in hand with Gluttony in a way where if you're at a point where you're playing Gluttony, you're trying to push yourself to like as close to 100% uptime on your mitigation as possible because you're worried about getting one shot. And Vision Major is just what accomplishes that best out of all the major. Vision Major and Minor combined is what accomplishes that best. So that's why you take it. Not so much that Vision is insanely stronger than other traits. I think there's relative value in Aegis Major. I think there's value in Sphere Major. I haven't grinded out rank 3. Rank 3 is not really that big a deal, but I still think there's value there. There's value in Anima Major for threat or just for getting through scary packs faster. Maybe there's even value in Null Dynamo Major, but I don't think so. That's something I'll have to think about and play around with. But I think when you look at it and when you're playing for a situation where you feel like you need Gluttony, you probably also feel like you need Vision, which is why you see this combination run together so often. Now, with Spirit Bomb, like I touched on before, if you're trying to be like halfway between aggressive and defensive, a lot of people like to go Spirit Bomb Vision, and I think the better choice is actually to go Gluttony Crucible, if that's your play. Crucible being our highest overall damage option, both bosses, priority target, and it just adds up over the dungeon to be a lot of your damage. Just because Gluttony obviously is stronger defensively than Vision is. And then you can still get your damage from Crucible, or you can run Anima depending on how you're pulling the dungeon. That would be my recommendation if you're like halfway between. You don't want to full commit to either. Rather than running Spirit Bomb with Vision. I think if you're in a situation where you're running Spirit Bomb, Vision is not typically the play. I think I would also run Anima or Crucible, typically Crucible, if I'm running Spirit Bomb, because it typically means I'm in a situation where my base Demon Spikes plus meta, I'm gonna live this dungeon. Like, I'm gonna be okay. I'm not gonna get globaled anywhere. I just want to crank. But you could also consider running Spirit Bomb with Sphere Suppression, because you might find yourself in situations where you have to kite more with Spirit Bomb, and Sphere Suppression obviously helps with that. Having a 45-second cooldown on a Giga Stun, or a Giga Slow, if you don't have a slow in your group already, you can run Sphere Major and have some success with that, and then you get a great minor as well. As for minor essences with Gluttony and Spirit Bomb, I think there's not too much difference in what you choose. I think in basically every dungeon, Null Barrier is the play. The damage you get from rank 3 on top of just the defensive value together is super good. I think Freehold is maybe the only exception. If you're doing Freehold on, say, let's look at the week for Freehold that we don't have the boys. So Bilge Rat week, which is next week, ironically, 2 days from now. Every third week you'll have, so every enchanted week you'll have Bilge Rats, which removes the Brine Scales from the dungeon after you complete the event. Now, in this situation, Freehold is extremely low magic damage taken. You'll get like the poisons and the diseases early on from the Bone Saws, or if you pull this stuff from the Corsairs with the Poisoning Strike, Bone Saws with the disease, as well as the shot from first boss. But then that's it. You're not taking magic damage anymore this dungeon, outside of like very minimal on Harlan, but that's not really, I think, anything worth considering. Maybe there you don't take Null Barrier. And if your team's very good at locking down Brine Scales, you can consider not taking it as well. But I like Null Barrier everywhere. I also like Strife everywhere. Your decision here becomes between Strife, Aegis of the Deep, and Sphere of Suppression, in my opinion. I think in most situations, Strife is the more consistent. It's from pack to pack, no matter what pack size. If you're fighting a boss, if you're fighting a big lad, you're still just have your flat versatility, your flat DR and damage up all the time. Now, if you know you're pulling huge and you're going to have 10 mobs on you a lot, sure, Aegis can be more powerful, especially if it's like a fortified week where you're not really scared of the bosses. Like a teaming fortified week might be a good example of Aegis being a good idea. If they still have teaming, did they change teaming fortified to not? Okay, so there's the teaming fortified week. So that week maybe you consider Aegis. Also, if you don't have a slow in your group, you might want to consider Sphere Suppression. I actually really like Sphere Suppression when I'm not running with a slow in my group, like an Asa Rogue, or if I don't have a Boomy for trees, so that I know I'm gonna be kiting more often. 30% isn't a lot, but it makes quite the difference when you do need to kite. And the haste is just good. Like 300 haste is our best offensive stat. 333 haste is a lot. Like that's a, let's see what I go from. I'm at 24.5% haste. Oh, I can't. I'm not taking a melee attack. Let me go take a melee. So I go from 24.5 right now to, where's the tank boys? Oh, here they are. Are you the tank guy? No, you're the raider guy. You're the tank guy. Yeah, smack me. Give me this buff. %31 haste. Oh, I got an overwhelming power proc too. Fuck. Yeah, I get 31% haste just off that. No, I got haste from something else. What the hell? Attack me. I keep getting overwhelming power procs, dude. 29. You get 5% haste basically from wearing this, which is a big number when it comes to reducing cooldown on your Demon Spikes charges and then just generally having more globals to fit with healing.
So I would consider that. And outside of those, I guess if you're running Crucible with Spirit Bomb, you can consider Vision Minor as well, but only if you know exactly how you're pulling, and it's gonna be the difference between you having meta where you want it and not having meta where you want it. Um, so TLDR is I default to Vision Null Barrier Strife when I'm running Gluttony, and I default to Crucible Null Barrier Strife when I'm running Spirit Bomb. Now the discussion on this is more hotly contested. The 108 talent tree, like it's kind of like that's understood. If you're scared you're gonna die, you run Gluttony. If you're not, you run Spirit Bomb. But on this row, I personally default to Last Resort. A lot of people like Void Reaver. A lot of people like Soul Barrier. Again, depends on what kind of content you're doing, right? So Soul Barrier is effectively Hour of Reaping, but you just have control over it, right? So you consume all souls within 25 yards to add to the shield, and you shield yourself, absorbing 71k damage. Now, an interaction with this that I don't think people take into account is if you're in high enough keys, you're going to take 71k damage in the time it takes for you to consume those souls. So the shield goes up, and then just like with Soul Cleave or Spirit Bomb, there's like not a huge delay, but there's a delay on when the souls are consumed. There's like an animation, they come in, whatever. And if you're in a big enough key, the shield's gone before they're consumed, so you don't get to add to the shield, which is a big X for me on Soul Barrier in like pushing very high keys. Now, I know I said my checkpoint for when I start thinking more defensively is around 18, 19, 20. This is like, no, I think no matter your skill level, when you hit the 18, 19, 20 range, that starts to happen. Maybe closer to the 20 range, because 18, 19, you're still relatively safe on a lot of trash. But that starts to happen where you hit Soul Barrier and it's gone before you get to add to it. You still consume the souls afterwards and heal for all the soul fragments, but you don't get that added to the shield, which takes away from it. And I don't feel like there are too many situations where a global on Soul Barrier is what would save my life at super high keys. But if you're just trying to like totally self heal, self sustain, be a tank man in lower keys, whether it be 15, 16, 17, 10, 11, 12, whatever, and you just tell your healer like just DPS, or you don't know your healer and you don't know if he's going to do anything, because you need a little bit of help at those level keys. You can kind of self-sustain yourself, but you do need a little bit of help. Soul Bearer adds on to that. Then there's also the argument for Void Reaver. Void Reavers effectively just take 6% less damage the entire dungeon. And again, in pug keys this can be good. In lower keys this can be good. It corrects mistakes just by effectively you take less damage, so you're in less danger. You need less healing. However, in almost every situation, in almost every pack where I'm afraid of dying, or I'm worried I'm going to die, in keys past 20, I'm not going to die, I'm not going to live because I took 6% less damage, and I'm not going to live because I shielded for 70k. Typically what happens is you low roll on Gluttony procs, or you make an error and you have an extra gap in your mitigation, or healer external is needed to be used on somebody else, whether it be bark or sack or paint sup or whatever you have, cocoon, whatever your healer has, needed to be used elsewhere, and you couldn't use that to fill a gap in your mitigation. And you're just in this situation where it's just like, if I don't parry, I'm dead. And if you're dead, that often scuffs the key, and now the key's over. Like, a tank dies in certain situations, like the key's just over and you're not gonna time it. And in those situations, I think Last Resort is by a mile the best talent, obviously, because if the other two talents aren't going to save you, and procking or not dying and procking meta will, it's like that's the best talent. But I think it's also good in lower keys too, because if you know you have last resort, you can pull much more aggressively. You can pull, like, if you don't have set places in like a very high key situation where you know, like, all right, I need to have cheat for this pull, I'm gonna have cheat for this pull, and I'm gonna have cheat for this pull. So these three pulls, and if I don't proc cheat on this pull, great. That means like I'm less stressed everywhere else in the dungeon because I know I still have my cheat proc up. Because that's typically how I approach um, high keys. Is I have certain pulls. It's like, okay, I have meta for this pull, and then if I cheat on this pull, it's fine, and then I'll have meta for the pull after that. Or sometimes there's pulls where it's like, all right, I'm definitely cheating here. I'm not gonna meta. I'm just gonna cheat, and then the pull's gonna last long enough that I'm gonna need meta after my cheat proc's over, and yada yada. Like, that's going into a little bit of detail, but as you play through a dungeon, you should be thinking about these things, right? I think that's what makes a good tank, and that's what I'm starting to realize as well now that I'm like just recently swapping to tank. There's a little bit of a different mindset on how you move through a dungeon than as a DPS. So in a 15, for example, say you would normally do this pull in 2 packs, and you would do it in 2 packs because of tank damage, not because of group damage. Now, if you have cheat, you could probably do that in 1 pack, and 6% less damage taken isn't necessarily going to push you to doing that in one pull. And Soul Barrier isn't necessarily going to push you into doing that in one pull. Whereas Cheat just gives you the safety of like, all right, I can do this and it's okay. Like, I'll just die and now I'm in meta and I can't die. So that's my argument for Last Resort. Take it as you will and kind of experiment in your keys because it may be different depending on your group, group comp, and I guess experience on the class, because like I am relatively new. I think I have a really good conceptual idea for how the class plays. Mechanically, I'm getting there, and just tanking in general, we're getting there. So maybe a better Vengeance Demon Hunter is just like, nah, dude, you don't need Last Resort. You could pull this Giga Pack, and then 6% damage is definitely enough to save you. And I don't think that's ever the situation, but maybe we'll see. And with these, I don't think you change your essences based on which ones you're playing these. I think your essence choices are dependent on Gluttony versus Spirit Bomb. That's why I wanted to talk about them together. And then this talent row is just take Last Resort. It's just best. Don't listen to the boys telling you to take Void Reaver and Soul Barrier. And if you do and you like it more, tell me about it in the comments, please. Seriously, hit me with examples where you think Void Reaver and Soul Barrier are better, and I would love to learn something as well. So I hope you guys like this little discussion. I know it's a little rambly, but that's how all my videos are. So if you are already here, you probably enjoy this kind of thing, or you hate yourself, one of the two, I don't know. Either way, thank you so much for watching. Appreciate it. If you like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. I'm going to start pumping out much more, I hope, as I get my other tanks geared up. We have Brewmaster in the works. We have Prot Warrior in the works. And then my 4th tank, I want to do DK, but I don't think it's going to be strong enough, so we might end up just doing Prot Paladin and getting that ready for next season. So keep your eyes peeled. I will hopefully have more stuff up soon as I get these characters geared, get into keys, get some experience, get some like hands-on play time with different talents and essences and builds, and can offer you guys some insight into what I'm thinking in these keys. So hope you have a great day. Thank you for watching again. Peace out.